According to D.C. police, on Wednesday, Edwards was shot and killed by her ex-partner, 35-year-old Stephon Jeter. Police say Jeter also shot and injured Edwards' daughter, then fled with the 3-year-old boy they shared before turning the gun on himself.
At 6:30 p.m. on February 11, 2026, the streets of Prince George's County, Maryland, suddenly turned into a high-speed nightmare. A black pickup truck was flying through traffic, cutting lanes, running lights. And behind it, police. Sirens screaming, radios crackling, officers calling out directions like they were chasing a ghost. Inside that truck was 35-year-old Stephon Marquis Jeter, a man authorities say had already done something unthinkable just moments earlier in Glover Park, Northwest Washington, D.C. And somewhere in all of this, a 3-year-old child was missing. The terrifying part, no one knew if that child was alive. Then the chase crossed back into Washington, D.C. And in Southeast, near 30th Street and Nash Place, the truck suddenly crashed. Officers rushed in, weapons drawn, expecting a fight, expecting a hostage situation. But when they reached the driver's seat, they froze. Because Stephon Jeter wasn't running anymore. He was slumped inside the vehicle bleeding, with what police later described as an apparent, self-inflicted gunshot wound. And as officers stood there trying to process what they were seeing, one horrifying question still remained. Where was the 3-year-old boy? Because the child was not in the truck, not in the street, not in the crash scene, not anywhere. And at that moment, the case became something much darker than a shooting. It became a race against time. Welcome to True Crime Stories, where we break down real cases, real investigations, and the chilling details behind headlines that leave the world asking, how could this happen? Before we dive deeper into the case of Rayven Amuan Edwards, the 34-year-old mother whose final moments shook Washington, D.C., I need you to do 2 things right now. Hit the like button to help this story reach more people. And subscribe to True Crime Stories, because this case gets even more disturbing the deeper investigators look. And trust me, by the time you hear what happened earlier that day on W Street Northwest, you'll understand why this was never just a random shooting. Now, let's go back to where it all began. Earlier that same afternoon, the quiet streets of Glover Park, a peaceful neighborhood tucked inside Northwest Washington, D.C., seemed like any other day. Residents walked their dogs, cars rolled slowly down the road, the kind of calm that makes people believe nothing truly evil could ever happen there. But at approximately 4:39 p.m. on February 11, 2026, that calm shattered. In front of an apartment complex located in the 4100 block of W Street Northwest, a sudden burst of gunfire echoed through the area. It wasn't the kind of sound people mistake for fireworks. This was sharp, violent, final. Someone nearby made the call. Seconds later, emergency dispatchers received reports of a shooting involving multiple victims. When 2nd District officers arrived, the scene waiting for them was horrifying. On the ground lay an adult woman, motionless, bleeding from multiple wounds. Not far away was a young girl, only 10 years old, also injured, crying, struggling, and fighting through shock as blood stained her clothing. Another child, a juvenile male, was located nearby. He was physically unharmed, but clearly traumatized, standing in the middle of chaos no child should ever witness. Within minutes, D.C. Fire and EMS rushed to the location, attempting life-saving measures. Paramedics worked desperately, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to restart what was fading away. But despite every effort, the adult woman could not be saved. She was pronounced dead at the scene. Soon, investigators would confirm her identity. Rayven Amuan Edwards, 34 years old, a mother from Northwest Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, the 10-year-old girl was transported to a nearby hospital. Doctors later confirmed her injuries were serious, but considered non-life-threatening. As officers secured the area, detectives began the immediate work of piecing together what had happened. Witnesses were questioned. Neighbors pointed toward where the shots had come from. Others described seeing a vehicle speeding away. It didn't take long for investigators to narrow their focus. They quickly identified the suspected shooter as Stephon Marquis Jeter, a 35-year-old man from the same area. But this wasn't a random street attack. Detectives learned something far more personal, something that instantly changed how the case was treated. Jeter and Edwards shared a child together, a 3-year-old boy. And after the shooting, authorities believed Jeter fled the scene in a black pickup truck with that child. Now the case had transformed from a homicide into something even more urgent, because the suspected killer was no longer just escaping. He was disappearing with a toddler. Within a short time, the Metropolitan Police Department released Jeter's name publicly and began circulating his image, along with details about the truck. Officers on patrol were alerted. Nearby jurisdictions were notified. And behind the scenes, investigators were racing against the clock, knowing every passing minute could mean the difference between rescue and tragedy. As daylight began to fade over Washington, D.C., the city entered a state of fear. A mother was dead, a child was wounded, and a 3-year-old boy had vanished into the hands of the man police believed pulled the trigger. And no one knew where he was headed next. By the time investigators secured the perimeter at W Street Northwest, the case had already expanded beyond a single crime scene. It was no longer contained to one block, one building, or one moment of violence. It had become a moving situation. And at the center of it was a child who had disappeared without a trace. The focus shifted immediately to the suspect, Stephon Marquis Jeter, 35. Detectives confirmed he had fled in a black pickup truck shortly after the shooting, and inside that vehicle was his and Rayven Edwards' 3-year-old son. That detail changed everything. Because now, law enforcement wasn't only dealing with a homicide investigation. They were dealing with a potential kidnapping unfolding in real time. Within minutes of identifying the suspect, MPD issued an urgent alert to surrounding agencies. Patrol units across the city were instructed to be on the lookout for the vehicle. License plate readers were activated. Dispatch channels carried a constant stream of updates. At the same time, officers attempted to reconstruct the timeline leading up to the escape. Witness accounts described a sudden eruption of panic after the shots. People recalled seeing a dark truck leaving the area quickly, weaving through traffic with urgency that didn't match normal driving patterns. But no one could confirm direction with certainty. What investigators did know was more disturbing. The suspect had not fled alone. He had taken a child, and that child had no known contact with anyone else at that moment. As the evening deepened into darkness, the Metropolitan Police Department escalated the case further, issuing an Amber Alert for the missing 3-year-old boy. His description, along with details of the vehicle and suspect, was broadcast across digital alerts, road signs, and emergency systems. The entire region was now watching for one truck, one child, one man. Hours passed with no confirmed sightings. Inside command centers, tension mounted. Maps were updated repeatedly. Officers tracked possible routes leading out of the district into Maryland, especially toward Prince George's County, where traffic corridors offered quick escape options. Then just after 6:30 p.m. a breakthrough came. Prince George's County Police reported spotting a vehicle matching the description, a black pickup truck. The alert was immediate. Units moved in. What followed was a high-speed pursuit that stretched across jurisdictional lines. Sirens filled the night as police followed the suspect vehicle through Maryland roadways, attempting to maintain visual contact while coordinating with Washington units. The truck did not slow. It did not stop. It pushed forward aggressively, weaving through intersections as officers coordinated containment strategies. Then, unexpectedly, the pursuit reversed direction. The vehicle crossed back toward Washington, D.C. Multiple agencies were now involved, including both Maryland and D.C. law enforcement units, all converging on a rapidly evolving chase route. The suspect's movements became increasingly erratic. At times, the truck appeared to accelerate without caution, then shift lanes suddenly as if attempting to lose aerial or ground tracking. Inside that vehicle, the child's condition was unknown. No communication, no visibility, no confirmation of safety. Only uncertainty. As the chase approached the southeastern corridor of the city, officers tightened their perimeter. Roadblocks were considered. Tactical units prepared for potential interception. The pursuit was nearing its end, but no one knew what kind of ending it would be. And somewhere inside that moving truck, a 3-year-old boy remained at the center of a situation that was rapidly spiraling beyond control. The pursuit had been building toward a breaking point. As the black pickup sped through the southeastern edge of Washington, D.C., the coordination between agencies tightened into a single objective: containment without losing sight of the vehicle. But by this stage, the situation was no longer stable. The suspect driver, Stephon Marquis Jeter, had already crossed multiple jurisdictional boundaries, moving from Prince George's County, Maryland, back into the district with a level of urgency that suggested desperation rather than escape strategy. Then everything changed in seconds. At approximately 6:30 p.m. on February 11, 2026, near the intersection of 30th Street and Nash Place Southeast, the truck abruptly lost control. There was no gradual slowdown, no negotiation, just impact. The vehicle collided with force, coming to a violent stop in the roadway as debris scattered across the surrounding area. Police units closed in immediately. Officers moved toward the wreck with weapons drawn, expecting resistance, expecting movement, expecting anything that would indicate the suspect was still operational. Instead, what they encountered was stillness. Inside the driver's seat, Jeter was discovered unconscious, suffering from what investigators later described as an apparent self-inflicted gunshot wound. Emergency responders attempted assessment on site, but the situation was already critical. He was transported under police supervision to the office of the chief medical examiner, where official determination of death would later be made. But even as authorities secured the scene, one urgent question overshadowed everything else. The child, the 3-year-old boy who had been taken during the chaos at W Street Northwest, was not inside the vehicle. Not in the front seat. Not in the rear. Not anywhere within the wreckage. Search teams immediately expanded outward from the crash site. Officers scanned nearby streets, alleys, and residential areas. Door-to-door checks began in surrounding blocks. Every possible direction the suspect might have traveled was considered. Meanwhile, the Amber Alert remained active. Dispatch centers continued broadcasting updates. Residents across the region were urged to remain alert, to report anything unusual, to check yards, porches, and vehicles. Minutes stretched into tension-filled uncertainty. Then slowly, a second development began to emerge. Information from Prince George's County Police confirmed that shortly after the pursuit entered Maryland earlier that evening, there had been confusion surrounding the child's exact location within the vehicle. That uncertainty now became critical. Because despite the high-speed chase, despite the crash, despite the suspect's condition, there was still no immediate confirmation of harm to the child. And then finally, a separate breakthrough arrived. Authorities confirmed the missing toddler had been located safe at a family residence in Prince George's County. He had not been inside the wrecked vehicle at the time of the crash. The Amber Alert was officially canceled. Relief spread through command channels, but it did not erase what had already happened. A woman, Rayven Amuan Edwards, had been killed earlier that day at 4100 W Street Northwest. A 10-year-old girl had been wounded. A community had been shaken. And a man suspected in a domestic-related killing had died following a pursuit that ended in a crash on Nash Place Southeast. In the aftermath, investigators were left with a case defined by speed, fragmentation, and emotional devastation. What began in front of an apartment complex on W Street had moved across cities, crossed state lines, and ended in silence on a darkened street corner. But for those left behind, the questions did not end with the crash. They were only beginning.